Professor Walter Turner. I am essentially one part of a dynamic team of people, which includes, as you see there, psychological services, behavioral services from the County of Marin, as well as the Umoja Equity Institute. Let's start where we should start. The land acknowledgement statement. The College of Marin, representing our Kentfield and Indian Valley campuses, were built on stolen indigenous land. At College of Marin, our goal is to cultivate authentic and collaborative relationships with trust as the foundation. The College of Marin team has a team that's currently working to create an official land acknowledgement which centers the voices of the indigenous communities and the planet. Anything short of this necessary inclusion would not only be a performative act, but also one that continues the colonizer mentality that we need to retain from replicating. We look forward to updating the community with a statement based on indigenous voices representing the traumas and genocides of 500 years. And essentially what we're saying here is we're inviting those indigenous communities to be the voices of what that statement should look like and what that statement should be. Our next speaker, I can't say enough for someone who comes all the way from Michigan to be with you today. Welcome Dr. Kevin Coakley to the stage here. Pleasure. Dr. Coakley.
So today, we're going to talk about feeling like a fraud, the impact of the imposter phenomenon on mental health among minoritized college students. What do we mean when we use this term, the imposter phenomenon? The imposter phenomenon is the experience among academically or professionally successful individuals of feeling like intellectual frauds. It's the idea that if people could look within the windows of your soul, that they would see someone who is not nearly as confident, as competent, as intelligent as your accomplishments would suggest. Essentially, it's the idea that you think that you are, there's a phrase that we used to use back in the day, fake it and funk, that you are essentially fooling people into making them see you as being someone that you don't believe yourself to be. So you see yourself as an intellectual fraud. And it's estimated that upwards of 80% of people have experienced feelings of imposterism. So imposter feelings among people of color, among minoritized individuals, is different than amongst their white counterparts, white peers. And the things that we want to consider is that when you're talking about people of color, minoritized individuals, we often must overcome significant challenges, including a lack of representation. I mean, I don't have to tell you the impact of being in a space where you're looking around and you don't see a lot of people who look like you, with whom you can identify with. So lack of representation becomes a very important environmental context. Being in a racially hostile workplace or educational setting, experiencing marginalization, and experiencing discrimination from one's peers. Most importantly, what can we do about it? And I want to go over some strategies that you might find helpful. And first, I'm going to focus on the individual strategies. First, document your successes. Now, why is this important? Well, again, remember that individuals who feel or who struggle with imposterism, they tend to diminish the things that they've done well. And so, what we're saying here is that we want to encourage people to be intentional in documenting your successes. So, having someone, keep a diary. So, it can be, written, electronic, whatever, but documenting their successes so that, you can do it, weekly, bi-weekly, a month. But doing so, it forces you to be intentional in noting the things that you've done well and to revisit that, to remind yourself that, you know what, I've actually been doing some good work, and you need to sort of see it, document it, to remind yourself that you've actually done good work. So documenting your successes. And if you don't take anything away from this talk, please take this away. Imposter feelings are not a life sentence. There are strategies that you can use to successfully combat them. And again, when I say you, not just the individual, but the institutions as well. And so on that note, I thank you. I have some resources to share if individuals who are interested, and some references, and thus concludes my talk. Thank you.
As a coach, you spend a lot of time together on the court, but if I don't know you as a person and where you're coming from, I can't adequately meet you where you're at, and therefore I can't coach you well either, because I have to understand that you're a person first, and then a student, and then an athlete.
As a coach, I'm not just lip service saying that if you put in the work, it will pay off. Like, I do my best to keep my word, and the team sees that, and the players see that, so they know if I do what I'm supposed to do, then I do have more opportunities. So, kudos to Kobe for putting in the work, and couldn't be more proud of him.
What was the message you received about someone that had darker skin than yourself? So black person, brown person, I just want you to think about that. When you look and remember back your community where you grew up, what did it look like? Who came to your house? Who were your friends? Who were your parents' friends, right? What does school look like? Who were your teachers? What was their racial makeup? So if we start to break that down, it's really critical to say, that didn't just happen. That reaction was not because someone was scared. It's because bias lives in our brains to the point where we, as individuals, right, have believed it, and then we act on it.
Looking at the Asian hate, and I really felt like it's not talked about enough, and it's not advocated for enough. And I just don't want that community to not feel that way.
Thank you, and that is definitely what we saw as well. So.
There is better representation here than where I lived previously, Florida.
Honoring Marin, there's a lot more representation here than what I'm used to. So I also wrote that it's just nice to see people who look like me and to see the culture, but also the food. So much more food.
Mm-hmm.
I actually took non-credit classes because I didn't know any English at all. And I made all my way to get a master's degree. So you guys can use me to come and talk to your students if you want, anytime you need me. I'm a very good advocate for clients, especially for the Latino community.
One thing that I think is so beautiful about community college, being a community college, graduate myself, that I gravitated wanting to coming back and working in the system was, serving my community and being in a system that was open entry, open exit.
When I think about equity and access to care for marginalized populations, I also think about stigma reduction. So we know that stigma is a huge issue in regards to even when there is access to care, not everyone will use that service. So in an integrated system, when you come in to see your doctor and say, I'm not feeling well, I feel sad or stressed or scared, or I've had this trauma, what we do is we say, I'm so glad you've come, and I have somebody on my team to help you. So really destigmatizing that is, I think, actually profound, because you can just go to your doctor. You don't have to go find a mental health clinic.
If we're going to look at equity as a movement, then it literally means, from the context of mental health, as access to opportunities, resources, and services for the purpose and for the intent and for the outcome of empowerment and self-sufficiency and self-determination. That's what equity really means. It isn't charity, it isn't performative, it is a transformational system and process and movement that changes people's lives and conditions.
So when we talk about mental health, when we talk about equity, when we talk about inclusion, as both of these esteemed panelists were speaking about, I started to think about, but what does that really mean? We have all these words, we have all this jargon for simple stuff. And the simple stuff is, we don't have enough equity to be included. We should be talking about the people that are disenfranchised and those individuals that can't afford the services, not because they don't have the money, but because they don't know how to find the resources where that money lies.
In the conversation about mental health, we do focus too much just on the what it means to have psychological well-being as opposed to psychosocial or biopsychosocial well-being, right? So when we're talking about working with populations that have been overlooked and don't have access to the same resources, my team and I talk about all the time, you can do all the evidence-based CBT in the world, but if someone doesn't have a safe place to live, or have food on the table, or they're worried about how they're gonna pay rent, you're not gonna see a change in outcome.
It is very important that we look at the intervention strategies that we, and I'm going to address the clinicians in the room, if there are any clinicians here or therapists or counselors, to really address and look at the fundamental practice of what is being trained, offered, and actually applied to consumers, in particular in this case, poor consumers of color, underserved populations. There is a big difference in the cultural and in the intervention practices when there is such a focus on the individual.
If you come from the community I come from, you don't talk about mental health growing up. Matter of fact, it's tossed out the window. No disrespect to my mental health professionals here, but you don't talk about it. Why? Because you're taught to be strong, be tough, keep moving. It's the struggle, and it is. But we're never taught to take care of our minds until it's way too late. So equity and inclusion belongs in the same conversation as mental health starting at a young age. Side by side does it because we intervene very early. We work with youth all the way from K through college, giving them mental health tools so that they can operate in the arenas of life and still be functional and understand that it's okay to live a healthy, happy life from a mental standpoint.
Red panda, spatula tail hummingbird,
Turkey vulture.
Oh, yeah.
The water bear, you know, a little tardigrade, a little microscopic that can live.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like a microscopic.
We're going to think about what these animals look like, and they're going to inspire us to then create these fantasy creatures. And let's pop it out.
Antlers.
Antlers.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, antlers like a what?
Like butterfly endless, maybe.
Yeah.
Antlers what?
What like antlers like
a moose.
Like a moose. See, it's moose.
You spent this week or yesterday learning about ways in which we disenfranchise our students on the regular, right? We never said a thing about formerly incarcerated or incarcerated students. It's very interesting. You know, sometimes I feel like that's the last permissible thing that you can be discriminatory against in this culture. And I'm here to highlight that that's not okay. And I think we all are here to highlight that that's not okay. And we do it in various and sundry ways, right? We do it by just discounting the fact that people who are incarcerated maybe want to get educated, maybe have families, maybe live lives, maybe are smart, maybe are talented, maybe are all these things, but they're locked behind bars, and so you don't know them, you don't see them, you can't touch them.
When I meet with students for an academic incident, right, they plagiarize, and they tell me why plagiarize, because this is the reason. I'm like, okay, well, let's acknowledge the problem, let's take some responsibility, let's talk about what happened, but then also let's find the underlying issue, what's the problem? And that could either be something that is home-related, work-related. So I think our goal here is to get them connected to that resource so it doesn't happen again. I think that's the part of the education approach that we have, even throughout the student conduct process. In ComCare does a great job because it gives us that tool to directly connect students with resources that we have on campus, but even off campus.
What I mean by cognitive impairment is, what is it that's shifted from this person's perception on race as it relates to him or herself or themselves, that have now negatively impacted not only their view of selves, but the view of others, okay? Their own people, white folks, and so forth. All of a sudden, they were hit with the racism club, bam! Some of them say, oh my God, I'm brown. That could have been me. Or some people say, damn, I knew it. This has been going on all along, and finally, TV and George Floyd showed it. As therapists, or even as lay people, any acute response to something, to a stressor, that is much more magnified to what the response should be, it's safe to say that that is a trauma symptom and a reaction.
And someone used the word think tank. That's exactly what this is, actually. And I spoke with someone in the back about beginning to infuse yourselves into these policy-making teams and groups and things like that with this in mind. Have a little cheat sheet there, but you're going in as an infiltrator, if you will. And sort of looking at going into these policy think tanks that happen without us in the room.
Right.
All the time. And
No young people in the room.
No. Right.
No
Yes.
women in the room. No people of color in the room.
Yes, the same group of guys.
That need name tags, because they all look alike.
The whole purpose of this, one of the things that I really enjoy about being here, being around all these academics, all these smart people, is that we've been talking about mental health and things like that in the areas of therapy and being able to apply the things that we've learned in academia into the ideas of mental health. What many coaches have realized is that they can take advantage of the idea of entrainment, and that is a way in which many different people have learned how to conserve energy or to make life easier going through trauma. So we have calm response and we have entrainment. So we're going to start playing with these ideas here. I'll play it twice before you come in. Three side. Beautiful. You can always listen a little bit closer.
What we're seeing is pre-pandemic, right? 1 in 4 students experience a diagnosable illness. And again, we know this is underestimation, right? With all the stigma and all of that, we know the situation is much worse, but this is what we have. So we have a pre-pandemic 1 in 4, and you have mid-pandemic, you have 2/3 of the students reporting higher level of stress. And then we also did a 2021 student-centered listening tour to many of the colleges across our system. And when we asked the student, right, what is your #1 challenge, mental health, comes up over and over again. And most recently, we did a statewide student enrollment survey looking at prospective students and students who were once in our system. Again, 1/3 of the students dropped out and withdrew from our system because they have to prioritize mental health. Right, again, I'm talking to the allies here, so I don't need to convince you to tell you how dire the situation is. But I think it's important for us always to kind of level set before we even engage in that conversation. Every time a student says, I want to do this, but I'm doing this and I have to do other things, and all of that creates additional pressure, right, for our system and urgency for our system to really not just address mental illness, but really looking at mental well-being across the board. We all need it, and of course students need it. But really, again, think about the approaches that colleges and the system can support in. At first, they are shifting burdens, and at first, they're increasing access for mental health. right? Shifting burdens, you will see trauma-informed approach. That's part of the board resolution to increase system-level competency in trauma-informed care. So it's not just about trauma-informed care in mental health intervention space. It's about trauma-informed care in policing, trauma-informed care in records administration, right? Trauma-informed care in financial aid and in the classrooms. So it needs to be a system-level capacity building. DEI affirming campus, I just want to bring a couple things that are fairly tangible. Campus climate and public safety regulations having passed really are mandating colleges really review and update that. And then EEO innovative best practices are also in place right now to support colleges really diversify is faculty and administrators, and also really support that type of evaluation, right? In really overall increasing, enhancing student experience. And then culturally responsive learning environment is another one. ASCCC and 5C in partnership with the Chancellor's Office co-developed this DEI in curriculum model principles to really encourage faculty to really look into redesign their curriculum. And then what I mentioned, social determinants of educational success as a framework to think about our work collaboratively.
So now let's talk about the roots of anti-fatness. There was 2 historical developments that led to the fear of fat bodies. One of them being the rise of the transatlantic slave trade, and 2, the spread of Protestantism. So racial scientific rhetoric about slavery linked fatness to greedy Africans, and religious discourse suggested that overeating was ungodly. In the United States, fatness became stigmatized as both Black and sinful. And by the early 20th century, slenderness was increasingly promoted in the popular media as a correct embodiment for white Protestant women. So the phobia about fatness and the preference for thinness have not principally or historically been about health. It was never about health. And today, a lot of anti-fatness has nothing to do with health. The fear of the imagined fat Black woman was created by racial and religious ideologies that have been used to both degrade Black women and discipline white women. Elites are constantly working on differentiating themselves from subordinated groups, and so they often distinguish themselves by cultivating different tastes, diets, and physical appearances that are in opposition to those of subordinated groups. Anti-fatness became a tool for social distinctions, to normalize social hierarchies. So how does all of this lead to eating disorders? Because the idea is, well, you know, white girls and women, the media, they wanna be a certain size at the end. You just gotta eat. That's maybe some of our understandings of eating disorders, but it's a lot more complex than that. Well, to begin with, eating disorders are creative maladaptive ways of spiritual and psychological survival. I forgot to mention earlier, but I am a person still living with an eating disorder. And just as it's been a bad thing for me, it's also the reason why I'm still here. And that's a mind bend right there. Because eating disorders serve a way to gain control, feel like you have control over something when you do not have any control outside of you. It is a way to conduct self-harm. And if we're seeing our environment being degraded, if we've seen people that look like us be degraded and dehumanized, what are we gonna do to ourselves but commit self-harm? That's why harm reduction is so important. And also eating disorders have a numbing factor, and it's a way to escape. It's a way to unleash a lot of rage as well and unresolved grief. And for many people, it's an attempt to attain less oppression. For folks who engage in disordered eating as a means to try to control weight, many times it's because they want one less oppression in their plate.
My question is, as it relates to how I can best support or direct our students that I work with peer mentors primarily. as it relates to the impact of social media, right? It's so pervasive and immediate, and so much of folks' identity these days is wrapped up in these curated facades. And so, some folks are seeking validation, you can get that. 100,000 people can big up you right quick and also tear you down and cancel you in a moment's notice, whether it's regarding, your intellectual capabilities, your successes, your weight, your aesthetic, all of that. So give me something that I can do to help support our students, because it's a difficult time to navigate.
It is important that we understand both the good and the not so good with social media and how it can be how it can sort of perpetuate negative information, whether it's about a concept such as the imposter phenomenon or negative messages that students are internalizing, and now we are seeing the results of that. I don't know that I have a good answer to your question other than helping students to understand that there are ways that they can engage in social media that can be healthy, but that there are ways that are really detrimental, and it's easier said than done. When I think about the students that I have, when I think about my children, they all sort of consume these social media outlets, and I think it's just the only thing that I can say is that we have to help them learn how to navigate these spaces in ways that don't damage their self-esteem, and to help them understand that, look, everything that's being said on social media is not healthy.
Social media literacy is so important and has to be taught to the little ones more than ever. I always encourage the young people that I work with is to be highly critical of who they follow and where do they consume. And do these people actually care about them? And do you actually support people of different sizes, different abilities, different backgrounds? Like, are you using this platform to also learn about to just learn, really? So I think providing those skills to young people is so important. And there's that generational gap. Like, my parents couldn't have this conversation with me because that didn't exist in their time. And now I think that for us that are somewhere in between, have a role in building these skills with young people and building that critical awareness of social media.